Portia Berry-Kilby is a political commentator with Young Voices UK who joins me now to go through the papers on the front and inside the day's national press. Good morning to you, Portia.
Morning, Rosie.
Look, Suella Braverman, in the Times, some senior Tories are saying Braverman owes us some answers. Does she?
Well, I think largely this is a non-story, and it does seem like an attempt by civil servants to drag her name through the mud. And I think it is fairly understandable why a minister wouldn't want to be on a speed awareness course with 23 other people. And of course, maybe it was a bit of a goofy thing on her part to ask a civil servant whether she can do a one-on-one course. But at the end of the day, when she was told no, she writes the accept to the points on her licence, pays the fine, and she did what she should do. This isn't really, I think it seems to be making a mountain out of a molehill.
She has broken the ministerial code previously. Do you think that sort of doesn't now help her, where there might have been a bit more forgiveness in this case, considering her track record?
Well, it definitely doesn't look good if it is found that she's broken the ministerial code twice. But I think sending an email to a private account or from a private account in the first instance of a breach is quite different from thinking, I've signed up to do this speed awareness course. This really wouldn't look great for a minister, and probably isn't the best use of her time anyway. Is a way of minimising this, getting around it and finding out no and just accepting the consequences.
Does this actually show us, I don't know what you think, but does this actually show us the sort of deep divisions currently at play in the Conservatives Party?
Well, I think it very much has shown two different parties coming out in either support of Suella or saying more needs to be done, and this is quite a big mess up on her part. I think at this time there does need to be a bit more unity in the party, and this seems a clear thing that everyone could rally around and say, everyone makes mistakes. This seems like an innocent question that's backfired. And in retaliation to her being stricter on immigration, you now have this story leak and making the front pages. It seems very funny timing. If it isn't a smear campaign.
Yeah, because we've heard already, Terry was just laying out some of the complexity of the week ahead for not only the Home Secretary, but the Prime Minister as well. What do you think Rishi Sunak should do?
I think Rishi Sunak should say, let this be and move on. He has bigger fish to fry. And if he really is taking a lot of time looking at this, then I think it calls into question his judgment about other matters. And at the end of the day, he isn't there to discipline naughty school children. There's other processes for that. And
well, he does need to enforce the ministerial code.
For sure. And I don't think this is worthy of an inquiry. If he thinks it is, then fair play. But at the end of the day, I think this is quite straightforward. She's asked a simple question. Can this be a one-on-one meeting? I don't think that's necessarily clear that that's to advance her personally. I think that could even just be presented as an efficiency matter. And I think at the end of the day, Rishi Sunak should recognise that and not get bogged down in the various disciplinary measures.
Let's move on to the front page of the Times and this idea for the NHS app to let patients book private healthcare. The idea being that, you'd be encouraged to use this app to choose treatment in private hospitals if you would get maybe the treatment quicker. Because the Prime Minister, Portia, is trying to look at strategies to whatever they can do to bring down waiting list times.
Yes. So while I'm a little sceptical about any NHS app, given the roaring success of the Pingdemic, I think it is encouraging at least to see some form of a solution being brought forward about how to deal with the NHS waiting times. I think it will also be positive that there should be greater transparency as well around what are the options available and how long are patients expected to wait before they can get basic treatment. So I think largely this is a step in the right direction. Whether the app is actually successful, I think, is one of the bigger questions. But it in theory should facilitate greater choice. And that's always a good thing when it comes to healthcare.
A really obvious case for you then that sort of the principle is right, but whether in practice it'll actually execute the delivery we need maybe is the question. Look, in terms of delivering for the NHS, Keir Starmer's going to say today, all big NHS targets, I'm reading inside the Times, will be reached in the first term of a Labour government. They are some really big promises and pledges that he's making.
For sure. This is no small promise at all. And I think it always begs the question of, well, how will Keir Starmer actually achieve this? And I think, once again, that's the bigger question at play here. And he has said that there might be a series, like the focus will be on prevention, not cure, which also seems perfectly straightforward. But how will he achieve this? It seems that there might be a series of bans about advertising junk food or smoking to children. So, whilst that does present, once again, the Labour Party as the party of the nanny state, I think at least he is backing up a very, very bold claim with some solid ways of achieving things, which is, I think, a fairly positive thing. At least it isn't just one grand promise before an election with no plan of delivering it.
What we are seeing is fairly more aggressive promises and campaigning, really, from the Labour Party for the next general election. And I think sort of the economy will be take front and centre, and then healthcare close behind as sort of the key electoral battlegrounds that we can be watching out for. The Prime Minister's on his way back from the G7, and there's a photograph in the Times of Rishi Sunak, President Zelensky and Ursula von der Leyen. They're saying here, the analysis from the paper is that the leaders conclude the G7 with a China warning, saying that China's aggression is the biggest challenge of our age. How do you think that they sort of all fared at the G7? It was a fairly united, unanimous front.
Yes, it definitely did seem more of a unanimous front, which is pretty unsurprising when there is the war in Ukraine and when you also have the issue of China. And I think by ending on the unanimous front of more needs to be done about China is always a good thing. And I think it's positive that there is greater attention being shown to China and the threats that poses. I think for too long it's gone without enough international kind of unified front to the threats posed. I think the fact that people basically know there is genocide happening in China and very little is done in response to that is a great tragedy. So if the G7 puts actually turns their words into action, then this would be a very positive outcome.
Yeah, I think sort of what we heard over the weekend was the G7 nations issuing the harshest rebuke of China yet. How that will all come to fruition, we will wait and see. We've got a little bit more about that on the programme in the business news in about half an hour's time, so don't miss that. From something very serious to, well, not so serious, but you can't read the papers and avoid the fallout of ITV's This Morning. And Portia, today, it'll be a very different programme than perhaps viewers, sort of casual viewers of the programme who hadn't followed the story, I would have expected, because Philip Schofield will no longer be presenting the programme and Holly Willoughby is having 2 weeks off. You kind of almost wouldn't believe the amount of press coverage this has had over the weekend. But what we're reading in the Times is that potentially it was Holly Willoughby that just said, look, this can't go on. If Philip Schofield's going to be here, you won't have me.
That is very much how it seems to be. And from all of the gossip columns, shall we say, my read of it is that Holly Willoughby felt slighted that Philip Schofield hadn't been more open about his brother's trial that was going for sex offences, and that had basically wrecked their relationship and that she couldn't work with him. So the ITV producers have clearly come on the side of Holly Willoughby and thought that they will draw in more viewers than Philip Schofield. I guess whether that is the case will be a matter of seeing how the viewers actually turn out in the coming weeks. But it is very much a public kind of spread of a failing friendship here, which is a sad bit to an otherwise mildly comical story, given the attention it's had.
Yeah, and some of the sort of vitriol online is absolutely, bitter and awful. And you may have very sort of limited sympathy for people who have, glossy jobs with huge sums of money. Do you think the programme is bigger than the presenters?
Ooh, I think the presenters definitely carry it. And I think the Philip and Holly duo is very well known. It's very successful. People like watching them and their friendship. But at the end of the day, if that friendship has fallen apart, then the viewing is only going to get more and more painful if they are sat side by side. So I think the decision to lose one of them had to be made. But yes, I think it's a very good point whether the show will actually succeed without the dynamic duo at the helm.
Well, we'll see what the programme looks like this morning at 10 o'clock. Front page of the Daily Mail. Now, drug driving overtakes drink driving. They're saying a shock report reveals the danger on the roads as 80 a day are caught high behind the wheel. It is fairly alarming, Portia.
It is. And had Suella been caught drug driving, then I think there would have been a lot more uproar, and rightly so. But I think what's interesting about this story and the drug driving is that so few cases are actually prosecuted, because it takes 4 months-ish to get the test results back from taking a sample, and there's only 6 months in which to prosecute. So there's a lot of very high drivers and getting away with it.
It sounds like there is, and out of clearly that is outrageous behaviour. But they say an average of 80 motorists are caught every day. Many escape justice because of delays in processing blood tests. The sort of Mail have led with that story this morning. Portia, thank you so much for your time going through the papers. Portia Berry-Kilby, political commentator with Young Voices UK. Appreciate your time.